The game we are looking at today is Dead or Alive 6, specifically the PS4 version. And no, it's not the free Core Fighters version, so don't worry. I will say that I'm not that great at fighting games, so keep in mind that the video is from a perspective of a novice. Overall, I think DOA6 is a lot of fun. There's new things about it that I find very good, like the graphics, new gameplay additions, and some helpful features for beginners and novices. Other aspects that aren't so positive come up here and there too, like really expensive DLC for example, but we'll get to all that. Even though I generally don't cover Dead or Alive games on the channel, I'm sure a lot of you won't be surprised to hear that I do like a lot of their games. Well, a lot of the games, basically all of them. The series has seen decent success over the decades. While primarily consisting of fighting games, the Dead or Alive Extreme games are quite infamous among gamers, with the first Extreme Volleyball game on the Xbox even receiving mainstream praise, most notably from IGN, who gave the game 9.2 out of 10. Those were the days. The DOA fighting games were always something I paid attention to, even though I lacked the systems to play them on. I remember seeing reviews on TV of various DOA games in the early 2000s, and there's a few specific things that always stood out to me. Obviously the female characters and sexy outfits, but also very smooth 3D gameplay, highly detailed graphics, especially with the Xbox games, and the interactive environments. I got into the series myself when DOA 5 came out, but I have some experience with earlier games too, now that I picked a few of them up for cheap. Let's start right at the beginning. Putting the game into the console. Wow, that's exciting. The game installs as you'd expect. I was quite surprised to see this prompt come up. You can disable the depiction of blood and violence. I left everything on because, well, why wouldn't you? See the blacked out game modes? Apparently the game is still installing in the background, so you don't have access to everything yet. How about a loading bar? No? Alright then. I thought something was actually wrong at first, but a quick search revealed what was going on. Gameplay feels pretty good. In fact, I really like it. I've read that DOA6 does have some changes with movesets, but I can't really say I've noticed anything since those kind of things go over my head in fighting games. It's been a while since I last played DOA 5 as well. Plus, outside of story mode, I don't really use that many characters. Hitomi and Mary Rose are the ones I usually use, sometimes Kokoro. The game basically still feels like the older games. You attack with punch and kick, there's various kinds of throws and holds, which are a way to counter attacks. I personally have trouble with holds, as you can imagine. I can never time them correctly. Sometimes I get really happy when I get it right in training mode, then I'm all proud about it, and then everything just falls apart in an actual battle, which is pretty funny. The biggest change I noticed right away, because it was in the tutorial, is the new meter, the break gauge system. With it you can perform some new moves, like special counters and holds, as well as something called Fatal Rush, which is a powerful combo that only uses one button, R1 specifically, or whatever your equivalent is on your console. It's really good for noobs like me, because a lot of times players like us don't manage to pull off cool moves. The animations and camera angles look quite dramatic and exciting. I like to imagine that this is what Jeremy Clarkson punching Piers Morgan must have looked like. And the fighter on the receiving end gets a bit beaten up, as in they look visually roughed up. For example, Zack loses his glasses, Mary Rose's twin tails come undone, and Phase 4's hood comes off. I really like that sort of thing. I guess the game is more violent this way, but I think it's fine. It's kind of cool to see the effects of a fight, like the way race cars look after a race, or old guitars that have been toured with for decades. I think some of you will know what I'm talking about. By the way, I'm going to assume that seasoned players will probably expect noobs like me to use these attacks all the time, and we will, so I'm sure they'll be able to block these attacks no problem. I found out that the fancy animations are censored when used on younger looking characters. So what's actually different? It's the camera angles. If you punch or kick certain characters in the face, instead of a close-up, the camera is far away. It only happens with, from what I can tell, Mary Rose, Honoka, and Nico. That's what I read in an article anyways. I find this a bit weird, specifically because this censorship applies to younger looking characters, looking being the key word here. So they're censoring something because someone might assume that these characters are younger than 18 years old, even if they aren't. All three characters are at least 18, by the way. Also, let's ignore the fact that Kasumi and Ayane were like 16 or 17 for the first 4 games, but who cares, right? Why go by fact when you can just judge by appearance? That's the lesson we're learning here today, apparently. Now that I think about it, this is a fighting game, so what's the problem with seeing someone kicked in the face? On the topic of fancy animations, the stages still feature all the danger zones the series is known for. I like them, and some of the newer stages have some unexpected places. Places I wrote in my script? Zones, I guess, which is pretty cool. Can't make things too obvious, but once you know where they are, you know where they are. While the stages themselves are nice to look at and fight in, I think a few more stages would have been nice. Some of the previous games had a lot of varied stages with fun and over-the-top danger zones. I don't know, I feel that's a bit lacking in DOA6. Also, I want the snow stage back, the one with the dynamic snow. Whenever I think of DOA, that snow stage is one of the first things I picture in my mind. There's 2 graphic modes on the PS4 version. You can either go for better looking graphics or higher FPS. I'm using a launch day PS4, so prioritizing graphics isn't the best thing to do. There's a noticeable amount of frame rate drops. I don't know how a PS4 Pro would handle it, but presumably it should be better. I mean, that's why it exists, right? To be faster than the base model. The difference in quality is noticeable. Everything just looks a bit sharper if you crank the graphics. Probably not something you'd notice on YouTube though. I think it's just too subtle that the YouTube compression probably just makes the footage look, the same. Except for the higher quality footage is stuttery, so you might notice where it's used. Back to the gameplay. There's a bunch of different game modes. Story mode is interesting. I don't follow the stories of any fighting game, so I don't know what the hell's going on here. The way the various missions or fights are laid out are a bit confusing at first. It's like a grid, which wasn't immediately apparent to me. The columns are the various characters, with the leftist one, the first one I guess, being the main story. The rows are the different chapters. As new characters get introduced, their missions will become available in the menu. The thing is, you end up seeing things out of order. You can jump between various time frames and characters. Often you'll see gaps in a character's specific storyline too, making everything really fragmented. DOA Quest is the next game mode in the menu. These are like challenges in a way. You have to complete several tasks during a fight to fully pass the mission. It's kinda cool. I like it because if I manage to fail something, which is very likely, the game will recommend that I play a relevant tutorial. It's a fun way to learn certain moves as well. You also gain money, which you can use to buy things like hairstyles, and also various glasses and sunglasses. It's also a way to gain costume pattern parts. It's a bit of a weird name, but it's basically just points towards outfits that you can unlock. Of course, there's also the usual arcade mode, which is good fun, as well as time attack and survival. In time attack, you try to complete the course as fast as possible, and in survival, of course, you try to survive for as many rounds as possible. For all these game modes, you can select various difficulty levels to suit your skill level. One part of the game I have no comment on is multiplayer. I don't have a PSN subscription, nor do I plan to get one in the near future. I never cared for multiplayer in fighting games either, at least over the internet. I do know that for many people, a bad multiplayer experience can be a deal breaker. I've read about complaints for DOA6, like no lobbies, which have been added, by the way, with the patch. There's also a discussion about the netcode being potentially awful, yet every discussion I see on the topic has people in it who say the opposite, stating they have no issues. I'm inclined to believe that there actually is some issues, because, if there wasn't, then there wouldn't be so many people complaining about it. It's not a problem for me because I don't play multiplayer, but I would recommend doing some research if you're worried about it. So there you go, a bit of a warning. Let's talk about costumes and outfits. It wouldn't be a DOA game without them. Fans of the fan service will probably notice that the default outfits of most characters are a bit conservative compared to previous games, so you might want to switch them out for something more cultured. Unfortunately, it's going to take a while before you can actually do that. There's a bit of a convoluted system when it comes to unlocking outfits. You can buy glasses, for example, no problem, and hairstyles, But remember how I said earlier that you get costume pattern parts? When you get them for doing certain things like doing DOA quest missions, the points will go towards a random outfit of whatever character you were playing. Since each alternate color counts as a separate outfit, it can take quite a while to get what you want. The points might also go towards something you don't want. Once you have enough points for an outfit, you have to buy it with player points before you can actually unlock it fully. They're really making you work for it. I don't mind it as an incentive to play the game, but would it have hurt them to throw you an outfit every once in a while just as a reward? I mean, you only get one alternate color to start with and nothing else. Speaking of outfits, let's talk about DLC. This is something a lot of people are talking about. I think most people here know about how expensive all the outfits are for DOA5. It's at least over $1,000 if you want every bit of clothing and every character. Currently, that's not the case with DOA6, but the season pass that is there right now is a pretty hefty price already. Apparently, eventually, you'll be able to buy characters and outfits individually, but that's not the case right now. I'm sure it'll be just like Dead or Alive 5 eventually, which is disappointing. The question people have been asking is, does Dead or Alive 6 feel like a Barebones game that needs DLC in order to feel like a complete game? I think the answer to that is no. I think it feels pretty complete. The only complaint I have is with the stages. But that's not so bad. I think there's a decent amount of fighters to choose from, and you've got all the game modes you'd want. And even if the outfits take so long to unlock, I think there's a good amount of them. I mean, more is always better, of course. So overall, I quite like playing Dead or Alive 6. It looks and feels good, and I do like the addition of the break gauge. The fancy camera angles make things a bit more exciting for me. I just wish the stages were a bit more exciting and imaginative like in the old games. Unlocking skimpy outfits just takes too much time as well. At least make it a bit easier and less grindy. There's a couple I really want to unlock, but this silly system with its random distribution of points is just making the experience pretty tedious. Also, the DLC nonsense is obviously just not something I really care for. I'm guessing that's one of the reasons the whole unlocking outfits thing is so time-consuming, to encourage you to buy the season pass or the upcoming, probably way overpriced individual outfits. If you have played the game, let me know in the comments what you think, especially if you're someone who is decent at fighting games, or if you have experience with other DOA games. I'd like to hear about some details that someone like me would miss, and I'm sure others in the comments would as well. Thank you to all the patrons who support me. Patreon.com/YSN is where you can find my Patreon page. Don't forget the second channel either. Link to that and more is in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.